folks. Welcome back. I am Grant Miller. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Replicated, and I'm also the host of the Enterprise Ready podcast. Hopefully, you're here because you're a longtime listener and you're excited that we are kicking this podcast back off. We started this, maybe 6 years ago in order to interview operators, founders, executives at enterprise software companies and really understand what it takes to build great enterprise software. We did about 50 episodes, and then the market got really tough, and it was 2021, 22, I think, and I just decided I needed to really focus on Replicated and have a family, have kids. Just things got busy and things got crazy. We went through the bit of the wilderness at Replicated, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, in some of these episodes. But now we're back. We're doing these podcasts. We're going to try to get out 2 a month is the goal. And just a chance to talk to founders and builders and folks who are creating great software and understanding what insights they have, what lessons they've learned. We're really excited about finding out as much as we can. A whole new wave of software companies have come out. AI has happened. Lots of things to talk about, and hopefully you'll join us on it. So sorry for the long hiatus, and I'm really excited for what we're going to jump into. And our first guest is actually a listener. So Tristan Handy is the founder and CEO of DBT Labs, and he actually spurred me to get this kicked off again. He's super, super smart, really interesting conversation about their open source model, what they've done in terms of, how they kind of got started a little bit. There's some really great podcasts out there already that cover most of those topics. So we'll just kind of let you listen to his interview with First Round or something else. But we get into a little bit of the background. We talk about open source. We talk about, some new models around kind of replacing the engine of open source projects in a more proprietary way in order to create kind of a new market opportunity, which I think is super interesting. We talk about, what they're doing with AI, talk about how their team's formed. There's just so many interesting topics we get to cover here. It's about an hour and a half long, and just really excited to share this with you. So without further ado, here's Tristan. All right, Tristan, thank you so much for joining me.
Happy to be here.
All right. I mean, let's dive in. So, I think I'll give an intro before this started, but would love to kind of hear a little bit about your background, kind of, how you got into enterprise software. And then, I think we'll probably point people to maybe the First Round interview or another interview you've done that gave a lot of background. But if you can give a quick recap of founding a DBT, just kind of that overview, it's always really helpful.
Yeah, I will do my best. And you're right. The First Round interview was a great kind of deep conversation about where the company started and how it's gotten to where it is. The just from a physical manifestation background, as we record this, I am in my office at home, and our air conditioning is currently broken. And so I'm in Philadelphia. It's like 80 degrees outside right now, and yet at the same time, because it's the middle of spring, there are too many birds chirping outside for our recording quality. And so I had to shut all my windows and my doors. So I am currently in a heat box, and the longer that we do this for, the more I will be sweating. So
I like
that's that background. I've been in data, depending on how you count it. Most generously, I would say since like late high school, which was in the late 90s. So, goddamn, coming up on 30 years.
Yeah.
Everybody gets into data most people get into data via like kind of weird random happenstance. And for me, I had a friend who his dad was a civil engineer, a partner at a very small civil engineering firm. And I was brought in because I knew how to use spreadsheets. And in the late 90s, like none of the old civil engineers like knew how to do spreadsheets, and the city was requiring them to submit bids with like digital documents. And so everybody gets in different ways. Um, over time, my career pivoted to, or like to continue to big consulting. I worked at Deloitte for 5 years. Um, that's where I learned how to use like traditional ETL tools, Oracle Warehouse Builder. I used my first ever like real BI tool, Cognos. You know, Not intending to throw shade here, but neither of those were particularly wonderful user experiences. But they did introduce me to like how data was done, kind of at scale. And then I went and got my first startup job. I didn't actually, I lived on the East Coast my entire life. I don't
Mm,
have, I had never had access to the kind of startup ecosystem or like how any of that stuff worked. And uh, just happened to have gone to high school and college with the founder of Squarespace, and it was,
mm,
he brought me in 2009, I think it was, to do a bunch of random things that were all kind of quantitative and process oriented in nature. And when I realized that you could wear jeans and at work and not tuck in your t-shirt, I decided that I was never going back to business casual. And so it was all about then like how do I figure out how to make a go of it as a startup person on the East Coast. And that is a non-trivial challenge to any listeners who have lived their entire life on the West Coast or had their whole professional career there. It's easier today, obviously, with remote working, but
sure.
in 2010, startup jobs were hard to come by. So I've had several of them, and then eventually started DBT Labs in 2016. Really, because I got to see a bunch of the cloud data technology it felt like it was like purpose built for somebody like me. I was like, I got to see
Mm,
how a bunch of companies were deploying this stuff very poorly, and I was like, I bet I can help people do it better.
that's cool. Uh, and so, I guess the backstory that people will probably hear if they listen to the first round interview, but you started as a consultancy, right? And I think that interview goes into a lot of that. I think does a really good job of it. But talk about like the quick introduction of DBT, what that project was, some of that community growth, and then
Yep.
we'll kind of really dive in, like post, some of that adoption and what that meant.
Yeah. So the the original goal for me was to create honestly a lifestyle business. I felt like I had a set of skills that was valuable, and uh, I wanted to have control over my time and where I worked and what hours that I worked. And I saw the kind of rise of the cloud and data ecosystem as an opportunity to do that. Um, it was super fun running a consulting company. It was fun like training new data practitioners. It was fun getting to see. I only worked with venture-backed companies that were like Series A through Series C. So there was a lot of repeatability in the problems that we got to see, and we didn't have to deal with all of the kind of organizational uh, dynamics that exist when you do data at much larger companies. Like I worked directly for the CEO most of the time, and we just like would do the stuff. So it was super fun. Um, in the process, there was the cloud data ecosystem at the time was like so immature that there was not, from my perspective, a a mature way to do data transformation. Which I don't know how many folks listening to this have a deep understanding of the data ecosystem, but there's this like thing that uh, regardless of what technology you're talking about, there's always a need to uh, centralized data, to pull data from different sources, and that's extracting. There's a need to transform the raw data into useful data sets. That's the transformation, and then load it. Previously, you would like do this transformation in an intermediate environment, and then you would load it into a database. Um, there were a lot of people doing a bunch of extracting and loading, but nobody was doing transformation
Mm,
blah blah blah. We can talk about why and the dynamics and all that stuff if you're interested. But uh, the short version was that, like, because of my experience at Deloitte, I kind of knew what doing this in a mature way looked like, and a bunch of these startup folks didn't had never really seen that. And so I tried to ask the question, okay, if Oracle Warehouse Builder was like an appropriate way to do this in 2003 in an on-prem context, like what's the way that we should do this in a cloud context, and also like that I could build with like super minimal resources. And so the early versions of DBT, I got introduced to Terraform back at the time, and essentially it was like, that's what we need. We need Terraform for
Mm,
Amazon Redshift. And so that was like essentially the original product hypothesis around DBT. What if we built Terraform for Amazon Redshift and used it to do data transformation? And that's a pretty counterintuitive bet, because most data practitioners at the time didn't want that, which is like why it didn't matter to me. Like we I was totally fine making a counterintuitive bet because I wasn't trying to build a product company. Um, and when I did talk to a bunch of people at the time, investors or data engineers, they said, like, this doesn't make any sense. Um, but it perfectly matched the way that I wanted to do work. I wanted to work in SQL. I wanted to work on the command line with Git, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and over time, our customers got exposed to our consulting clients got exposed to this. Their data teams got to touch DBT, and they found it to be so effective that they told their peers. They held meetups. They essentially like built the DBT community around the product without us ever really meaning for that to happen. And so yeah, we saw the community go from, you know, 3 companies to 1,000 companies over the course of 3 years, 3.5 years,
mm.
something like that.
Well,
And that's when we realized that like we just couldn't support this thing on like a consulting business.
and and I think what's interesting, it's like we know Terraform pretty well, and I think we've interviewed Mitchell on this. But one of the interesting parallels I want to talk about with open source is that what you open sourced was a CLI tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that actually has um, like a different commercial open source relationship than if you're open sourcing a database or something that's like, kind of a server side uh,
Mm-hmm.
thing. And so I'm interested to sort of like dig into that hypothesis a little bit and kind of like what open sourcing a CLI tool really meant. And like, I'm guessing it really had like a great single player experience initially, and that's kind of like the focus. And we can talk about then, I think so. Let's just talk about that first. Let's just jump off there. Like, how do you think about like that CLI? Do you think that's a great entry point? Like, how did you? I mean, I'm guessing you didn't really plan that initially, based on what you're saying, but um, you just wanted a really useful tool, and a CLI was probably the best way to build it. But talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So CLI makes a ton of sense from a tooling perspective, uh, for a million reasons that I think, I don't have to. I'm probably not the best qualified to talk about. I'm only kind of a pseudo engineer. The uh, it is there are a lot of open source businesses that come out of the kind of organic success of something that was not originally imagined to be a commercial offering.
Sure.
Um, so I don't believe that Jay and Neha imagined that they were eventually going to start Confluent
Hmm.
when they originally authored Kafka. I believe that they did not. And you can uh, you can see this play out time and time again. My guess, I don't know this for a fact, but my guess is that the original 10-ish authors of Spark also like did not anticipate that they would have whatever it is, $64 billion uh, company today. Um, and so the open source often has this like really winding journey where the initial thing may not be the thing, may not have like the form factor that you want ultimately to commercialize. And there are often these like two-step processes that you have to go through in order to find like true scalable success in open source. I think that some of those stories you're talking about server side versus client side. Um, some of those stories are easier than others. Now, maybe easier is not the right word, but maybe a little bit more straightforward than others. I
Hmm.
think that if you have a server side product, there is a more direct translation from open source to commercial. Step one is take the server and run it,
Sure.
and have good like operational characteristics behind your instance of the server. And probably if you do really well at doing that, and your open source project has enough traction, then that could get you to $100 million in revenue as a company, like by itself. And then you start introducing features that are only in the commercial distribution, and you kind of pull people from open source into commercial because of those features. And then honestly, there's typically like some type of a cost play. There's like a um, the open source engine is great, but something that we do in the commercial version means that all of the work uh, can now be done more efficiently.
Mm.
And you can see this. Confluent built a brand new engine for Kafka. It's protocol compatible with Apache Kafka, but their engine is called Kona, and there's meaningful cost advantages there. And Databricks released, I think it was all the way back in 2019. They released an engine called Photon, which is a complete rewrite of the Spark engine and has very significant cost benefits. And so the
And
the
have they kept
playbook,
have they both kept those proprietary?
they both kept those proprietary. They're part of
Mm.
the commercial offering.
Yeah.
So the one of the things that I've gotten to know both Jay and Ali over the years. They've both been super helpful. But the thing that they pound into me is that you can have all this clever platform around the core open source offering, but it's real hard to sell that because you don't. It's these are all almost always that like these are enterprise sales, and so you're trying to have a conversation about some characteristic of the platform that your buyer, not your user, but your buyer can understand and quantify and like make a business case around. And just saying, well, it's better, like users like it, is like not sufficient. And so cost is this like real unlock for a scalable open source business because you can develop a bunch of features that your users love, and then you make your buyer love you because you're like, look, you're already running on these workloads. We can help that all be 30%, 50, whatever the number is, cheaper.
Mm. Interesting. Is that a core part of your offering, or is it more about like control? And I think I heard you say in the other interview, like managing complexity is kind of the core value proposition.
Yeah. So we are we uh, did a press release, I don't know, 3 months ago or something like that, that where we shared that we had crossed $100 million in
Yeah,
revenue as a commercial business, which is great. And we've gotten to that point, I think, pretty quickly from our first dollar in software revenue. It took us, I can't remember, 4 years, 4.5 years,
that's
something
great.
like that. Um, so we're not all the way down that journey yet. The the kind of first uh, stop on that journey for us is um, helping large companies operationalize DBT at scale. Um, The second stop on that journey was managing organizational complexity. So, like, if you have hundreds and hundreds of DBT users, how do you allow them to create kind of reasonable software architectures in
Hmm.
their DBT projects? Um, and yes, uh, cost is going to be a big part of our next step along that journey, and that is a big part of the acquisition that we made in December and announced in January. We acquired a company called SDF, and we can certainly talk about that if you're interested. But the I think the core insight is that there's often this discontinuity in an open source business where there's this core offering that kind of lights the world on fire, and then you extend and extend and extend, and then many companies hit this point where they're just like, gosh, this core offering, we actually have to kind of start from scratch and like reinvent the technical foundation on which that was fundamentally built, so that we can continue to like draw the up and to the right
Hmm.
narrative around the product.
And is that where you think like cost becomes a big part of it and sort of speed and performance? And so, in a sense, like the fact that, I don't know, like software, like the bit rot that happens where like over time, like things just kind of get, like less performant because you're not using on the latest and greatest technologies and tools in your original project that might be 10 years old now. Like it actually is like, okay, well, we have an opportunity to take that core engine and optimize it and do something maybe proprietary that will help drive the business even further.
So I think this is a super interesting topic. One of the things, so I have you ever worked at a startup that like didn't work?
Yes. Most of them
Yeah.
that I worked at to start. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sometimes I ask that question, and you get a bunch of people who have worked in Silicon Valley their whole lives, and they're like, "Nope, I've only worked
Yeah.
at the like hyper successful companies." And I'm like, "Well, there's a bunch of stuff that I know that you don't know."
Yeah.
Uh, but one of the experiences that I took with me from companies that didn't work at scale is that it is hard enough to uh, build a software product that people want to buy, but that is actually not sufficient, because uh, you have to build a software product that people want to buy so much that your success in selling it actually not only does it allow you to kind of continue to extend the platform, but it allows you to periodically shred parts of the platform and rebuild them from scratch.
Mm.
And at every company that I've ever worked for that like didn't have quite enough traction, we were just trying to do that first thing. We were just trying to build enough of a platform that like we could make our next quarter. But if that's the game you're playing, you're actually never ever going to have enough space on your roadmap to go and say like, hey, this thing that we built 4 years ago or even 2 years ago is is like inhibiting our progress towards the future. So we're going to actually put 3 or 4 people on completely refactoring this from scratch. And if you're not having those conversations, then the shelf life of your commercial business is as long as the underlying technologies that you built the original product on last. And that often is not long enough.
Yeah. Uh, I have some very personal experience with this, even at Replicated. I say where we kind of like during our hyper growth phase, I mean, which was like kind of 2021, a lot of companies were hyper growing then, but we missed a product cycle. And
Mm.
so we like the industry changed underneath us in terms of like what was expected. And like our product was like not evolving to that. We were like continuing to like iterate and like close, customer demands because we had 80 people in go to market and like, uh, 20 people in product and engineering. And like we just couldn't keep up with the like little demands to use the product today, let alone like set the foundation for tomorrow. And we've spent the last 3 years like recovering and rebuilding based on that. So I definitely feel that. And I think to your point, like it is. I wish I had known the like that what a path that was going to take us down, right? And so your point here is like, you have to be able to do that ahead of time, and I think you have to have capacity as well. Like we just, in 2021 we hired like crazy on the go to
Mm.
market side, and we just like couldn't bring in enough engineers on board and make them successful, and so we were just like upside down. Um, yeah, one of my many like kind of you know roller coaster lessons there. So, um, but
Yeah.
I yeah. Anyway, so I
It's
feel you.
it, it's the kind of thing that uh, you you have to you have to anticipate it's going to come before you know exactly when it will come.
Mm,
And then sometimes when you realize it's happening, you have actually lost the amount of time that you needed
yes,
to solve the so it is one of those things where what I don't know if you ever think about this, but I often think about how grossly underqualified I am for my job.
sure.
uh, but the one of the things that I think founder CEOs bring is that deep instinct around, gosh, I don't think what we have today is gonna get us to where we need to go over the next 24 months. And because if you didn't have the kind of depth of context that I think founder CEOs tend to have, you would actually just like run hard into a wall. And yeah, so
No, uh, it's a really good point. I think it's my advice, and I think there's more conversation around this. It's like quasi founder mode, but like when you have that feeling, you actually have to like truly act on it and like move your
mm,
organization to act on it. And like if you like have that discussion, but you sort of like are like, well, my like that's not what my executive team wants. So like I'm gonna let them. They're the like they've been here, right? They've seen this stuff all work, and like they're talented, and I hired them because I trust them. Like I think you have to trust your instincts more around that I think I was really ready to, at least in 21, 22. So
yeah, it's a real gut check
yeah,
because there is almost always near-term implications for
for
making
sure.
decisions like that. You may explicitly need to slow down to go fast. Um, that I really messed that up. Slow down to speed up, um,
No, that was good. I
which
think it
like
worked.
which nobody wants to do. Like you tell
Yeah.
your CRO that like actually we're going to take down the number for the next 3 quarters because you're going to do this big refi. Like no, nobody wants to do that.
No.
So sometimes you got to make some people unhappy.
Yeah. Uh, it's okay. So then, I mean, you've also done a good amount of investing, kind of,
Mm.
I'm sure just like angel seed stuff, like probably similar to what I do. Um, what are some of the patterns and things you've seen, particularly in the last like, few years around, managing this transition? I'm sure if you're like me and you've invested a lot of like the kind of ecosystem around you, you've seen, some companies really thrive and some really kind of fail. And so what are some of those key lessons you've taken from that experience?
Hmm. Hmm, hmm, hmm. Um, so it was maybe a little less than 18 months ago. I wrote a a blog post titled something like "The Modern Data Stack is Dead,"
Hmm.
um, and uh, this was part of this was from my experience running DBT Labs, but also like I think a lot of it came from my experience as an investor. Um, so at this point, just to share the kind of context that I have here, I've invested in I think 50 companies. They're basically all either software or data infrastructure or AI, but I don't really do AI at the product level. I'm doing like AI at the infrastructure level as well.
Sure.
Um, and I've been doing this for since I guess 21,
Hmm.
and um, So yes, I have gotten to see my share of things that didn't work. The the comment on the modern data stack thing is coming from a place of back in 21, 22, when I really started investing. I really believed that, and there are people who in the data ecosystem who consider this like very naive and optimistic. Um, but it seemed like we were on a path for uh, a software ecosystem that looked a little bit more like uh, dev tooling does and which is to say, like, lots of best of breed tools primarily chosen by users,
Mm,
um, plenty of opportunity for many vendors to win, and well defined APIs to allow them to kind of work together in kind of integrated ecosystems without needing like M&A and market consolidation to kind of
sure.
force that integrated ecosystem. And it turns out that not only was I wrong about that for data, because actually when the capital markets changed, uh, and vendor consolidation happened pretty quickly, and out of the companies that uh, seemed like they had potential at that point, like honestly a reasonably small percentage of them still seem like they have potential. But it honestly, I think it's happened within dev tooling too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so I guess that I was, overly optimistic about that approach in two different contexts.
Yeah. I mean, and look, and I've made similar mistakes, and I've seen. Uh, I think we also might have like overfunded some of these spaces where maybe
Yeah.
a winner will eventually emerge once, like, kind of the other competitors fall by the side, and there will be, but like it just got too crowded. Um, I guess, like, one of the interesting questions, though, like, at least I'm guessing you still talk to a good number of founders and such
Yeah.
as well. Um, you know, do you think, like, how have they changed their businesses since 2021, right? Since you started investing, what have you seen kind of, from within the companies you invest in? Like, how's mentality shifted? How's approach shifted? What are folks doing differently? How are buyers changing? I think that's like, understanding how, buyers, community, any insights you have there, I think are always are really compelling too.
Hmm. Um, I honestly don't know if founders have changed that much. I don't know that they're like founder playbook, which is the SaaS founder playbook was kind of like written in the like 2010
Mm,
timeframe. And yes, we've added cloud and PLG. We've like there's been some evolutions of it, but honestly, I feel like you could kind of go back to Dave McClure posts from the 2010 time.
pirate funnel or something. Yeah.
Yeah, Pirate Metrics, and
Yeah.
like that. All of that stuff is like still the gospel for what software founders still think about. Um, and the real benefit is that the the multiple stages of capital formation are doing a better job filtering ideas
Mm,
that actually have promise from ideas that are just like fine. And I think that I've never seen a founder come to me with an idea that's like actively stupid. I've only seen them raise money on ideas that are just like fine, and it turns out that that's not sufficient. And so I think it is honestly like a big boon to the entire ecosystem that those ideas are getting filtered out earlier, because
mm,
previously what was happening for several years was that founders would be able to raise money on ideas that were fine, and as a result they incurred this like multi-year obligation to do the best that they could for those employees and those investors. And actually, the right answer would have been like, move on with your life and do something better.
Yeah. And it made it like they could have been making a big impact at, another company that really had the right product or the right market, and the people that they hired, can go into those other companies as well. I think we've hired more founders that like kind of, left what they were doing over the last couple of years than we've ever
Mm,
had before. I'm not sure if you've
yeah,
seen the same thing.
yeah. I am. There was a time period where, and good acquihire outcome was 10 to $40 million,
Sure.
and now like that those things are happening at like 500K as like an IP acquisition or something like that, and
Yeah.
it's the filtering process is happening much more aggressively than it used to.
Yeah. Um, I mean, and it's I think you're probably in a very good position as that happens in order to sort of like maybe roll up a couple of those companies. How do you think about you know bringing in acquisitions, tucking folks in? Like, is that a I know you mentioned you did one earlier, but is that a strategy you think you want to continue to go down? Do you like uh, that, or is it? I know it introduces other challenges, but how do you generally think about the acquisitions?
Um, Yeah, we have done two acquisitions. I would say that both of our acquisitions are more on the tech and team sides
Hmm.
than neither of these companies were like looking for the exit doors. The first one was called Transform. It forms the basis of our semantic layer, and the second was called SDF, which soon will be the the new engine. We were talking before about how open source companies kind of go through this process where they kind of rebuild everything from scratch. The SDF technology will form the basis of the new DBT engine. Um, the uh, I think that uh, I I think that it's important to be good at M&A,
Hmm.
because there will be times as you know if your company's doing well, you're going to have to figure out how to uh, do things like grow your platform, compete with different offerings in the market. And M&A is just going to have to be one of the tools that you have at your disposal.
Mm.
And so exercising that muscle uh, early, both like as a founder, it actually takes some. It you have to understand how this process goes, how the conversations sound, how to sell another founder that they should work for you instead of give up their life's ambitions. Um, Hopefully they can pursue their life's ambitions better at your company, but like
Sure.
it will originally feel to them like that they're kind of giving up. Um, but like it's an important thing to find reasons to do it at the outset, because at some point you'll need to do it, and hopefully that's not your first time. Um, you can see like the Atlassians of the world uh, do this at reasonable velocity at this point, and it's really helped them. I would not have anticipated, if you took me like 10 years ago and said like, would Atlassian, you know, consistently grow their product offering through M&A? I As a company that was like grown bottoms up by a bunch of software engineers, like I wouldn't have anticipated that, but it makes a ton of sense, because your users want these like integrated ecosystems of tooling that all kind of works together really nicely,
Sure.
and buyers want to be able to buy things kind of together so that they can get economies of scale and all this stuff. So
And I mean, when you've thought about it, is it like were you acquiring like a new product that you're going to then go to market around, or is it more of a tuck in of like supporting existing products? Like, how do you think about that combination? Do you have multiple products? I mean, know, like, do you sell like multiple, like this is the core and then this is the add on, or this is the like two separate products? Have you done that move as well?
Yeah, the semantic layer, our transform acquisition, yes, does form the basis of what I would call an add-on SKU to the kind of core platform. You start using the core platform, and then this is a feature that you can take advantage of, and it's usage based. You pay
Got it.
for consumption of an API. Um, the the SDF acquisition was a true technology acquisition, and it's like going to form the kind of underlying engine that powers basically the entire DBT product experience.
Hmm.
Um, so it doesn't uh, it in itself is not a new SKU. It like powers all the other SKUs.
Is this like part of that kind of like you said, like maybe re-architecture, re-platforming in terms of what you're trying to do there?
Yes, yeah, I think that it is very akin to the kind of Kona or Photon
Okay, cool.
transitions that both of those companies went through.
And this was it a proprietary software company when you acquired it, or was it?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Um, and were they like operating? Were they like a partner first, or how did you like? How were they? Yeah, were they competitive or a partner? Where were they in the space?
Um, one of the interesting things that you get as I don't know, it can work out to your favor. It can be challenging um, when you're an open source, widely deployed open source product. Is that other companies will build stuff on top of that, and sometimes that shows up as partners building complementary technology that just automatically integrate with your thing, which
Hmm.
is great because that kind of dynamic creates uh, more pull towards this common standard. Um, and sometimes what ends up happening is people saying, I can build a better mousetrap than their
Mm.
mousetrap on top of the open source thing that they maintain. And back in the day, AWS was very famous for doing this kind of thing with like document DB, and I think they actually called it Elasticsearch.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
I can't remember what they. There's the whole trademark war.
yeah.
But like AWS has done this a lot. Um, in our uh, in this particular case, SDF uh, saw this large community of users out in the world doing this thing, and they said, "Well, we already wanted to build a thing in this space, so it makes sense to adopt a lot of the kind of primitives that DBT already uses." And they were in stealth for multiple years. We had never met them, heard from them. They had no real presence in the market, and they came out of stealth. I think it was June of 24, and I was immediately introduced through uh, a shared connection, and uh, it made too much sense. Like they were already building for the DBT ecosystem, and they had the luxury of being able to go off into a quiet room with
Hmm.
some super super smart engineers, and had like legitimately made forward progress on the engine. So they had no users. We had a lot of users, and they had technology that was relevant.
I mean, it's like outsourced R&D. It's perfect. It's
Sometimes it works.
Yeah, that's cool. Uh, and then it sounds like so you mentioned the other product is more of an add-on. This is like
Mm.
a kind of an engine that's going to maybe power like and kind of help uh, that. And your plan is to go to market then with the message here around like performance and cost and kind of like upgrade for this. And and is that sort of the key insight that photon like this is it's a transform move.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a couple of messages. We were talking before about the buyer versus practitioner
Mm.
messaging. Does this show up for you? Like, is this something that basically every
Oh yeah,
developer focused business, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so we have to bifurcate our answer to the question, like what's the value prop based on if we're talking to the economic buyer or the user, and the the cost benefits are very relevant when you're talking to the buyer. And it is like such a powerful message. We've already started to have some of these conversations. It's such a powerful message when you say, look, you by paying us for the proprietary offering, you will now actually spend less money
Yeah.
than previously. Like it just makes that conversation with that buyer like so simple.
Yeah, that is maybe like the dream, like scenario of why to buy my stuff. It's like it's because it'll cost you less money overall. Like that it hits the buttons around pain and urgency pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um, and especially when it's like protocol compatible between the two things, it's
for
like you
sure.
just have to like use a different thing, and all the code already works. So on the practitioner side, it the new engine has a bunch of capabilities around like language understanding
Mm,
that allow it to power really a modern IDE experience.
mm.
We'll be shipping a language server for VS Code that allows you to do all the kinds of things that most non-data developers have had access to for a while now. And it leaves and additionally the compilation times reduced by like 100x, and
Oh wow.
so you've got to pair those two messages together. Like practitioners want it and buyers also want it.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone so far as thinking about like I think I even saw somebody that put like a like you know exec slash developer like toggle on their website in order to like change the message completely, right? And just like wipe it out. Who are you, right?
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's a
I always admired HashiCorp for the way that they did this. They had HashiCorp.com, which was the one focused on buyers, and
yep.
then they had like Terraform.io or Vault. I can't remember what the extension
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
but and those were the ones that were focused on the developers.
Yeah, they that's a great point. They did a good job. I mean, partially I think Dave McJanet, right, like is one of the best marketers out there, and when you put him in
Mm.
charge. I mean, they've all and honestly, I mean, Mitchell and Armand were incredible too in terms of just like understanding their market and their users. But uh yeah, they did a really nice job of keeping those things connected, separate, talk to multiple different personas. It's hard to do.
Yeah, you have to figure out what your mechanism is to segment them because it is challenging they just don't care about the same stuff.
Right.
And if you have a practitioner on your website and you're trying to talk to them like an executive, you're going to sound phony. And if you have an executive on your website and you're trying to talk to them about practitioner stuff, you're going to sound like you don't freaking get it at all.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I have a theory, but like, where do you think you start? Like, what's the most important one of those to start with? Where's the foundation?
Like, who do you message to first?
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like most enterprise software companies well, no, you know what? There's a lot of people that start straight up with sales led motions.
sure.
I've always found that very strange. I feel like you should start with a product led motion. Like typically enterprise companies are founded by, product and engineering people, and the the scalability of PLG in the early days, both from like an experimentation perspective of speed, all of this stuff. I feel like you start with PLG, which means that you primarily are messaging to developers first. You just have to bake in the idea that like at some point we're going to add on this other layer, and you have to plan for that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if you, the main reason I would say is because you have to actually solve the practitioner problem first, and if you just end up, you know, what we called it was if you end up with message market fit, where your message really resonates and people are buying it, but when it comes to usage and product, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really solve the problem. Like you, so you have message market fit, but not product market fit. I think it can create real challenges in terms of how you end up like, I mean, just like people just end up churning, they're upset, like it's just harder, you've oversold them. And so by really focusing on that practitioner first, delivering what they need, solving that problem, I think you can then, elevate the message and go to market more strongly, to the end customers.
Totally. And
Yeah.
and it is so much easier to sell to enterprises once you can say something like, yeah, we already have hundreds or 1,000 or whatever the number is, companies using this thing. The social proof matters.
Yeah, for sure. It I mean that like logo selling, having these lighthouse customers that people want to be like, being able to tell the story of being like, I mean, we like our business was, you talk about HashiCorp, was built on the fact that we were the platform that they used to distribute Terraform Enterprise. I mean, that was the story
Mhm.
we told over and over and over again. To get them, we had, other cool developer tools, right? Like Travis CI and Circle CI and NPM and Sysdig and these folks. So like we had people that they thought were cool, and then we got HashiCorp, which everybody thought was cool, and so it just ended up being the way that we were able to scale the business on those logos. I'm sure you've had many similar stories and lighthouse customers and people that people respect. So
Totally. Yeah,
yeah,
it's uh, the there are these like little pockets of customers too. Uh, like it was somehow, it should be unsurprising that that once we landed Siemens and we got them as like a reference customer, the European market became significantly more friendly to us.
mm,
Uh, but at the same time, like with many of our early customers in the U.S., it was actually kind of unpredictable to me which ones of those customers were going to be the like really referenceable customers and which ones for some reason didn't. It wasn't always correlated with like how well known the brand was. So I,
I always think about it, it's like how much do their peers sort of respect them as like as practitioners or as like leaders in this space. And so, it's like if you were doing something that you were like, I mean, today, if you're doing something and that you want AI companies to buy, and you have, you know, OpenAI or Anthropic, and everyone's looking at them, it's like that great. That's the leader. Or if you were in when we started Replicated, I was like, Slack was the kind of company that
mhm.
everyone wanted to model after, or Uber. Just these kind of like you had to pick what there was just companies that people were really excited about how they were doing the things, and
Yep.
and that I think is the uh like is the indicator in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it doesn't hurt that the a big group of the team uh, that that we acquired with SDF comes out of Meta and Microsoft,
Yeah.
and just like the problems that they solved with their technology were the problems that they experienced at those companies.
Yeah.
So it gives not only does it lead to good tech, but it gives a lot of credibility along the way.
That story about scale and complexity and like, here's why this is gonna yeah, this is why it matters. That's cool. I love that. That's a really uh I mean, it's actually, I think to your point, maybe that acquisition doesn't happen in 2021, right? Because the market's just like, overfunding, they're just gonna get $50 million, right? So it's hard, from some VC right away, and it's going to be harder and harder to acquire them. Whereas now, I think the market's a little tighter, and it's easier to make that combination, and it's going to benefit everybody probably a lot.
That might be true. It's hard to know the counterfactual. I think it the compelling nature of the combination might have made it make sense regardless. But you're
Let's
you're
raise your
totally
hand.
you're totally right. It makes it easier.
Yeah. And then, do you have like you mentioned the other ones? Like, an add-on, do you have any like other entry points, like, or is everybody kind of entering either through the CLI open source or the core kind of like cloud offering? Are there like other products that somebody might come in for, or very different or specific use cases that maybe it's like configured differently for?
Yeah, it's a good question. There is uh, there's this really hard question that you have to face, I think, in many different product categories in developer tooling, where it is, um, are we going to be opinionated, or are we going to be unopinionated and kind of support whatever kind of choices that you make? And so an example of a product in our space that is, I would consider, significantly less opinionated, and I'm not saying this in a necessarily bad way, but Airflow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Airflow's very widely deployed. Uh, you know, it is a product that is both loved and hated simultaneously, but it is certainly widely used. And with Airflow, uh, you can kind of do anything, and uh, that is very powerful. But as a product person, it's also very challenging, because if your users are just kind of doing whatever, then it makes it hard for you to create experiences that kind of make them better, more effective. You become kind of like this container that they operate in, but you don't get a lot of control over like what goes on inside the container. Um, the the um, the choice we have always made, and I'm not, I'm sure that there's the chance that this will evolve over time, but the choice that we've always made is that we want to be the best tooling for DBT.
Mm.
Um, if you buy into our beliefs about how data should work, then we are going to make that experience efficient and pleasant and accessible to many types of users, and etc. Uh, the the challenge. So I think that makes a lot of things much easier for us. Like we've built an integrated Copilot experience across all of our product surface, almost all of our product surface area, pretty straightforwardly, and it works. It works
Mm.
well, because like we really understand what our users are doing inside of our product. Um, Whereas if you were going to build a similar Copilot type experience for Airflow, you would kind of just have to address like basically the entire software, you know, it wouldn't be that different from like an experience you would have inside a Cursor, because you can have to assume that they could write any type of software.
Mm.
Um, so it helps in a lot of ways, but then it also, we is not unusual that we will be pretty widely used inside of a large company, and they'll get excited about different aspects of the product, the platform, and they say, but what about all the stuff that inevitably doesn't run through DBT? Because like in any sufficiently large company, like not all data workloads are going to flow through DBT. And currently, you can do integrations, you can whatever, but like we can't help you. We can't really help you with this like random other thing over here that is like not written in the DBT framework. So will that change over time? Maybe, but it's something that I've felt pretty strongly, not generalizing, not like having this kind of other entry point over here that's not through the framework, because it limits our ability to create great products for our users.
I love that. I think it's a really interesting topic and interesting, to your point. Like, it's almost like a fork in the road as you're building, you have to decide how opinionated you want to be. And to your point, you can like really lean into like this kind of anything goes, or like we want to, control the experience and make sure this is great, and to like give you all these other reasons. It's how did you like, what was that a conscious decision at the beginning, or is like sort of that just kind of how you were building, and then that became something that was like an internal, well, that's just what we do?
Mm. Uh, yeah, no, it was pretty conscious. The a big part of the original product design thinking for DBT was who should be building data pipelines. And I anytime I talk about this publicly, I get blowback because a lot of our users uh, do not fall into this dichotomy. But my belief is that most data engineers should actually not be building data pipelines. They
Hmm.
should move down a level to data platform engineering. And I think AI will actually continue to push things in that direction. And I think that the people that should primarily be building most, not all, but most data pipelines are closer to the business.
Mm.
So what we did kind of early on is we created this new role that we kind of educated the market around that we called the analytics engineer. And somebody a while ago put it very succinctly. They said an analytics engineer is a pissed off data analyst. Um, but it's essentially, the DBT was originally built to say, let's enable the people who know the data best and are ultimately on the hook to deliver analytical results. Let's enable them to do this pipeline building work that previously only data engineers had been able to do. And so many of the like product assumptions for DBT kind of flow from that idea. And then you end up with this essentially a kind of programming framework or like a domain specific language uh, that is built around this idea, and it kind of naturally forces you um, to build experiences for that rather than to build kind of generic experiences for software developers.
That makes sense. Okay, and so uh, let's talk a little bit about then like your co-pilot that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Um, is this like a way to build that kind of DSL, that domain specific language, like build those? Is that what it does?
Yeah. Okay. So if you look at the things that a data engineer, analytics engineer does on a day-to-day basis, they create a bunch of assets. They refactor assets that exist. They debug pipelines that are in production. Like
Hmm.
you can literally make a list of like, I don't know, there's like 6 or 8 kind of core tasks that
Okay.
one of these folks will do. And for all of those different tasks, we have product surface area that enables you to do that thing.
Hmm.
CI, orchestration, pipeline authoring, all of these different things. We have product surface area there, and so the the goal of our Copilot is to essentially bring AI to every one of those experiences, and we're, I don't know, halfway, 2/3 of the way through touching all of them, um, and I think that over time, really all of these things that practitioners are doing on a day-to-day basis today are like highly tractable with current generation models with sufficient context supplied, and we have all of that context. And so then you start asking the question like, okay, uh, once I get to a point where there's a pipeline failure overnight and there's an agent that saw that looked at the error message, that looked at all the context associated with this pipeline, proposed a pull request, uh, tested that pull request in our automated CI process. And now I get into work in the morning and I just need to sanity check the PR before merging it. Like, what's the role of that person moving forwards? And I think that you either move down to be like, I'm building the platform, or you move up to, I'm closer to the business, I understand the requirements and how they like actually affect business outcomes. But you don't stay in this middle layer of like, my job is to meet with business stakeholders and turn their requirements into like working code.
Mm,
That, I think that's not actually as interesting of a job in the future as it, has been in the past.
that's really interesting. Um, so context, I agree, super important in being able to like get that kind of PR correct. The other part that I always think about here is how do I validate that it's like, it meets the DSL, it meets the spec, right? So do you
Mhm.
have like a validation loop that's happening to like sort of make sure whatever the spec is, it's not like, because what if you put it into cursor, it's going to be like, like you should be able to do this, right? Like, like this is it'll just invent some new parameter or some new like, thing. And you're like, well,
Yep.
that's not in the spec. So I don't know where you came up with that. So do you have like the validation loop then?
So, super good question. It sounds like you've probably been thinking about this a little bit
Oh yeah, yeah.
yourself. Yeah. The the thing that has, so our world is SQL primarily, and one of the challenging things about SQL from a dev tools standpoint is that SQL does not have mature tooling. You have a
Mm,
bunch of proprietary database vendors that have all extended the SQL language into their own proprietary dialects. They don't release ASTs. They don't release any of the like. There's no like language server for
mm,
like Databricks SQL. I don't think so. I'm pretty confident that there's not. Um, and so that means that the only way to validate that the thing that you wrote is correct is to actually like execute it against the remote database,
okay.
which is, to data people, that is just sounds normal. Like that's how that's worked for literally ever. Um, but to software people, that's like insane.
Yeah.
Like of course you need to know whether the thing you write is like semantically correct, code. Um, and so this basically all of the benefits of the new engine that I've been talking about um, flow from this core SQL understanding. Um, so it's what the SDF folks built was a multi-dialect SQL compiler. It generates an AST from your SQL. It generates what's called a logical plan, and it does so with like all of the type information from the database and from your code. And
Mm,
so you can actually like as you're typing know, is this code gonna work, and you get red squigglies and all that stuff. And so that is the like important thing that is needed in the agent based world where you have
yeah.
multi-step execute. You have to like try to write some code, you pass it through the LSP to validate, then you like try it again, etc.
Yeah, exactly. That feedback loop is just like the critical part. Um, that we launched a thing called Chartsmith, which like tries to do this for Helm charts.
Mm,
And the challenge there is like Helm charts are actually not code; they're just like a templated string, and
mm.
so it like creates all these other challenges. And so like, but yeah, this is. I think this is like a very very important problem. Is sort of like how do you get that validation loop inside of your generation of any of these, DSLs or anything else. So I'm super interested in this problem, and I think like as we solve it,
It
it'll empower a lot of things.
yeah, it is a thing that I have personally in years past spent very little time thinking about formal validation of code.
Hmm.
But um, when you start to look at, I'm uh, we have some super experienced folks on the team, and my favorite, like on the engineering team, and one of my favorite questions whenever I'm in a room with one of them is, tell me your craziest story of a prompt that you gave. We use Claude internally a lot,
Sure.
and Cursor, and tell me your craziest story of like the prompt that you gave and what the response looked like and how much that accelerated your day. And I think that we all kind of take for granted that that tool chain can work wonders when it's operating in a mature software ecosystem, when it can execute the command line program, it can pass things through a language server to validate. Um, but when you are in this world of Helm charts, which I don't know about as much as you do, it sounds like you can't kind of rely on this. And certainly in the world of SQL, like you also couldn't rely on this. And so there's a real opportunity to, or there's an impetus, there's a reason to up level the maturity level of some of these different areas.
Yeah. That's no, that's exactly right. It's so funny you say like SQL isn't like a mature, like it's just like a it's like a you I would think about it as like a bedrock of technology, and you're like, no, 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 like it's not, it doesn't have the maturity. It's like it's kind of these disparate holders and people and players. So
Well, like most software engineers don't write SQL. They use ORMs that write the SQL for them.
yeah.
And but when you go into the data ecosystem, like ORMs are like not suitable for the like
Mhm.
complex data workloads that we do. And so people hand author SQL. And the minute that you're hand authoring SQL, you realize like, oh my God, I have no libraries. I have no type checking. I have like nothing.
Yeah.
And that's why software engineers generally have not wanted to hand off their SQL, because it's an immature environment to do so.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then I guess this Copilot thing, one other question I had about it was like, where did you decide to integrate it? Like, is it
Mm.
in the UI? Is it in the CLI? Is it in open source? Like, where are the like, how, you mentioned like be able to create a PR. Like, where is it? Where is it integrated in terms of across the board?
Today, it's integrated into the user interface. Um, I I am very interested in pushing it down
Yeah,
into the engine and exposing it via the CLI and exposing it in VS Code and everywhere else. Um, but sometimes the fastest way to innovate and experiment is let's put it in the front end and see how people use it.
sure. Yeah, I mean that's what we did as well. So I mean, I get it. And then it's actually not that hard from there to like add the VS Code extension or an MCP server or whatever else you might want to do.
Yeah, if it's interesting that the main metric that we were talking about how there's a lot of the SaaS founder playbook that is written a long time ago. Um, one of the most like gospel metrics in this playbook is just like active users, whether it's
Hmm.
daily or weekly or whatever, and you measure the stickiness and um, one of the things I find so interesting about building Copilot experiences is that all of a sudden there's two metrics.
Mm,
One is user activity, but then the second is uh, acceptance rate, because in basically every one of these experiences, the what is it is a two-step process. First, it is like propose a change, and then the second step is like a user accepts the change.
sure.
Um, and so I'm really interested in the question of like what what is the right acceptance rate,
Mm,
uh, because it's probably not 100%,
sure.
but it's, I don't know, it's probably over 50.
Yeah.
I don't know what good looks like there though.
Yeah. That's a great point. And I mean, part of it just depends on like the quality of the prompt, and people are still experimenting with this stuff, and so they're gonna like say dumb things to it, and so it's like, how do you get the right, like how do you even get to the right prompts, like of real, like, prompts. So you have to, like, bifurcate that out, because there's still somebody who's going to say, people like to say dumb things to these
Yeah. Yep.
chatbots. So
Yep.
and that actually brings another interesting question, which is like, one of the, I don't know, I think our team, we were watching a Lenny's podcast, and they were talking to
Mm.
someone from Stripe. And one of the things they talked about was this idea of like metrics that are tied to like customer outcomes. Um, and it really got us thinking a lot about, like, because DAU or MAU is not like, your customers don't care what your DAU or MAU is, right? Like, they're
Yep.
like, why would I care about that, right? uh, Acceptance rate, they might care about, like, hey, like, I care that, that you suggest to me things, and I accept 90% of the time. I think it's good enough to accept. Uh, is that like, when you look at the metrics and the kind of things that you're really guided towards, do you have any that are really anchored around that kind of customer outcome? Because everybody, talks about ARR and these other things. Again, no, like, your customers don't care what your ARR is. They don't care what your net revenue retention is. So a lot of the metrics that, like, we drive as a business don't necessarily aren't the things that are driving our customers' success. Do you are there any metrics around that, I think, again, retention, your acceptance rates, a good one, but are other ones that you look at it that in that lens?
Yeah. The one that will show up on dashboards for us very quickly um, is uh, dollars saved versus
Mm,
open source.
yeah,
Um, so
it's a good
so
one.
one of the things we were like, we're not interested in releasing this new engine until we have really good tooling around observing the before state and the after state and the diff between those two things.
Yeah,
Um, because not only is it valuable for us as product designers, like, you can, over time, you make that number go up, but you also want to be able to, like, very clearly demonstrate it to customers. So it is some of the folks that we have on our team come from Airbnb, and we're in the product org at Airbnb. When they, as a company, kind of oriented around this single North Star of, I, I think I'm gonna, get this right, but I could be wrong. I think it was nights booked. It wasn't nights stayed. It was
mm,
nights booked. And there was something, I'm not going to do a good job of telling the story, but there was something magical about that particular metric, that it aligned the interests of, like, everybody building the product and the users. So you want,
both like the people that are there, like, they're staying, and the people that are listing. Yeah, exactly. Everybody. Yeah.
yeah, and we have not historically had a great kind of single metric that unifies those two sets of people. But I think this is a shot for us at having that. And when you can manage your business off of a really clear North Star metric, lots of things get easier.
Yeah, I think that I totally agree, and I think it makes sense that it's hard to in the beginning sometimes, because, like, you don't really have visibility into the before, right?
Mm.
Now you do. You have visibility into what the before is. The before is like, how are they using our product open source, and what was it costing them, and how are they using it after? Like, so there's visibility. When you were, like, introducing DBT to someone who's never used it before, it's like, well, how the fuck am I supposed to know what like, what their before was? Their before was like a mess. It's like, I can't quantify,
But it was a lot of times, like,
mess.
you were moving from kind of a legacy on-prem tool like an
Sure.
Informatica or something like that, and oftentimes the business case was, take a change that you need to make to a pipeline. How long did that take you before? Now, how long does it take you in DBT?
Hmm.
And we would often find that, I mean, this is embarrassing. This is like how bad the world of data has been. But like, people would be like, yeah, this took me literally 3 months, and I just did it in a morning. And that, but the funny thing is that, like, once you, once you move over, you stop being able to measure that anymore. You like
Sure.
jettison your legacy tool, and um, you want to be able to measure that on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Um, that's really cool. I love that. It's it is in our we have a I'll say we have a phenomenal data team at Replicated, and they've actually driven some of these things. They use DBT as well, and so that that we are happy customers, and it's I think a data team that is thinking about your customer outcomes and beyond just like what's happening, I think is actually a really powerful level up for companies as well. So just a
Totally.
plug for your ecosystem and your kind of folks. So
Absolutely.
uh, Tristan, I mean, this is I could continue to ask you questions about things and go into this for hours. But I want to give you, I know we probably got to wrap soon. Anything else you want to add in, talk about, things you want to hit?
Uh, Maybe one other topic that is just related to uh, how you, as a founder CEO, uh, operate your go to market machine. Um,
Yeah.
I I'm good enough on the go to market side to be dangerous. I have run marketing orgs of up to 15 people before, grown companies to 10 million or so, but I've never done go to market at scale personally, and so uh, a few years ago I made the decision to bring on a president
Mm.
and have all of the different go to market functions roll up to the president. And Brandon, who joined us from HashiCorp, where he was CRO, has been an awesome partner in that journey. But I mention this here because I think all founders have to figure out what are the things that I'm good at. Like, where do I add value? Where do I spend my time? Um, I was often so when I previously had uh, essentially our chief customer officer, our CRO, and our CMO all reporting to me. And that puts you kind of inevitably, even if they're like great at, they love each other, they're great at collaborating, all this stuff. Like it puts you as the CEO in this position of like sometimes needing to like have a really strong formed opinion on like how these things should kind of interlock uh, and I didn't feel comfortable with that. I was like, look,
Mm.
I'm not a world class go to market expert, especially on enterprise, maybe a little bit stronger on PLG. Um, and and so I would just encourage everybody who's going on this journey to figure out like what are the things that you're signing up to spend your time on, and you're saying like I am uniquely best positioned to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm guessing that you still um, are, I'll call it like, I don't know, like inspecting what's happening there. And
Totally.
yeah, talk a little bit
It,
about that. Like how what questions are you asking? What are you like making sure doesn't kind of change from what like that vision that you have of like what, the overall company, you know, brand and kind of how people feel about it. How do you guard that?
so I do it in there's a couple of things that I care a lot about. No, that's not true. I care about a lot of things, but there's a couple of ways that I actually like kind of try to inspect. One is I'm pretty close on pipeline.
Mm,
I understand our funnel. I understand funnel stages. I follow pipeline reporting pretty closely, and it's one of those areas where like misalignment can crop up there pretty quickly, and if you don't make sure that everybody's like has the same vision of the funnel in their heads and their roles and responsibilities, that could get unpleasant. So I still stay close to that, primarily from a data perspective. Um, I work really closely with our marketing org on things like brand and product marketing.
mm,
I think that brand and product marketing are CEO responsibilities forever. That will that's like part of the reason that you exist as a founder CEO. Um, and then I don't actually spend a tremendous amount of time like inspecting uh, like deals in funnel or any of that stuff. What I do instead is I participate in deals. I'm like on conversations with customers, with sales folks. I do uh, tours every year I show up in each of our regions for a week, and we get a bunch of meetings on the calendar, help people with uh, you know in progress deals, um, and that's what gives me the confidence to say, like, I understand the capabilities of our field team right now. I understand like how they show up to our customers, um, and that not that we're hiring the right people and that we're not embarrassing ourselves in front of customers.
Yeah. So I've been saying recently, you got to get on the production line, right? So you got to get down there in the
Mm-hmm.
meetings, and I've been doing it even recently because of all this AI stuff in the code base, but like be in the meetings, be in the first call, be on the closing calls, be across
Mm-hmm.
all those. And, you don't need to do it all the time for every deal, but like you kind of pop into some and you get a sense for what's going on.
Correct. Yeah. And honestly, people kind of take for granted that I'm going to have at least reasonable things to say on the product side. But every once in a while, I'm in a meeting with a sales rep and I help them progress a deal. And we'll leave that meeting and they'll say, "Huh, that was really good. Thanks." And it's the surprise in their voice. I'm just like, "Yeah, I can be helpful in your world too." It's very satisfying.
Yeah. I mean, my position on that is like, I'm guessing you did all the early sales and
Yes, totally.
and so you've seen this, who the right stakeholders are, who need, like, there are things I have experienced with sellers where my experience is like, it's really important to get a bunch of different stakeholders together at the same
Mm-hmm.
time so that, like, in my world, it's like, I need the director of engineering, I need the VP of product, I need like the DevOps person and maybe a CS person or support person. I want them all together at the beginning because it's like, I want everyone to feel like they have a seat at the table, at least an opportunity to say no, right? And like they're included in the decision, even if it's not their decision at the end, the support team or something, right? Like I want them to know that like they were there, part of the decision making process. My sellers are often like conflicted because they don't want to bring too many people into the deal and muddy things up. And I'm like, and
Yep.
in my experience, like, no, this is actually it's just unlock because you're going to actually, you know, be able to bring everyone together at once, align around what they really value, find kind of consensus. Um, and, but like, I think some of the selling instincts, particularly things that like kind of come from a little bit of like loss aversion,
Mm-hmm.
actually work against sellers. And I think
Yes.
as CEO founders, you're like, you just don't have the same loss aversion. You're like, I'm just going to make this the best deal possible. And like, here's how I know how to do that.
Yep. Yeah, it really does matter that you are managing across an entire pipeline. And yes, this deal matters to you, but it's not like going to make or break. It's probably not going to make or break your trajectory on the company or your current quarter or paycheck or anything like that. And so you can go for it a little more. Yeah,
Yeah. And you can, I think it's always important to challenge folks and make sure that you're trying to do it in a way that's going to be really beneficial to them. So yeah. Uh,
totally.
cool. Tristan, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for helping bring the Enterprise Ready podcast back. I'm committed now to try to do 2 a month.
That's awesome. I have been a long time listener, and I'm excited to see it showing up in my feed again.
Yeah, it's going to be back. It was I had to take Replicated through the wilderness for a couple years, and it took a little while to kind of get comfortable again, coming back out and doing this while I was trying to clean up my own house. So, uh, thank you for pushing me to do it again, and thank you for being the first guest back.
Hell yeah, it was fun to do it.
Awesome, man.